I can't speak for everyone, but I know personally Nuggets versus Wolves is the series I was looking most forward to all season long, and I feel like there's a pretty good chance this may just determine who represents the West in June. The Wolves are known for their generational team defense, and the Nuggets are known for having one of the most well-oiled offenses ever, so we run into a paradox. What happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object? The Wolves have a tough question to answer regarding Michael Porter Jr. because typically they put Conley on him, and the way he's been shooting to start these playoffs would have me a little bit worried. What I'm not worried about though is what they can throw at Jamal Murray. Remember, Jaden McDaniels missed the playoffs with an injury last year, and Jamal's gonna have to be really hitting on a diet of tough shots. Denver's got some strategies to shake Jaden, like here it's a double screen as soon as they cross half court, and it's really important how the rest of the defense reacts to these actions. Against Phoenix, they were comfortable switching Gobert or Towns onto the perimeter, but you can't really do that against Jokic because of his ability to punish mismatches in the post. He needs to see a big body at all times, or he'll just isolate from that block and get easy bucket after easy bucket. Typically, you'd think that would be the 3-time Defensive Player of the Year, and he's shown to do a good job one-on-one, although better offense wins more times than not. And knowing that, they'll throw Towns on Joker, a big enough body to bump with him down low, and he'll still get his, but it's more about how that affects the rest of the team. No matter what they try to do, whether it's a Jokic isolation or the two-man game, the best rim protector in basketball is waiting under the basket. Aaron Gordon only shoots about 30% on his open threes, so he isn't able to make Gobert respect him, and with him sitting back, it completely stalls the Nuggets' usual offense. Jamal runs pick and roll, Reed can get back to Jokic to take away the roll, and Gobert's just waiting under the basket to make a play on the ball. A guy like Nas is able to play more aggressive coverages on the ball as a result of having Gobert behind him to protect the paint, and from there, Jamal is forced into much tougher looks or decisions. So for the Nuggets, it's pretty much all going to be about how they pull Rudy away from the basket. One thing they've tried doing in the past is taking Jokic away from the ball and instead running their two-man game with Gordon as a screener, but that just allows Gobert to play his drop coverage. Gordon's only a threat to roll, so when Jamal drives, he's running into a packed paint, and from there they don't really have an advantage to play off of, so they're once again relying on tough shot making. I really like this counter from the 2023 series, where they set up the Gordon pick and roll, but instead of Jokic spotting up, he's going to set a second screen on his own man inside the arc, which gives Jamal a real easy path into a mid-range jumper. Something they've done in the past is put the ball in Gordon's hands up top to draw Gobert to the perimeter, and then getting into some action, usually some sort of screen from Jokic to free up Murray. Or they could start with Gordon up top, have him move it to Jokic before setting up quick action, and now that paint is freed for some of those remarkable passes. Another thing you'll see is Jokic start with it up top, as Gordon moves towards the ball as a sort of decoy to distract Gobert, which once again opens up the lane for potential cutters. Most commonly though, it's going to be a clear out for Jokic to attack Towns in isolation. Like I said, Cat's got the size, strength, and length to at least give Joker some trouble, but there's one fatal flaw in his man-to-man defense, and that's the fact that he cannot stop himself from fouling. As Joker battles with him over and over again, he'll likely get into foul trouble, and that kind of forces the Wolves to give Gobert the matchup, especially down the stretch of games. From there, they've got all sorts of tactics to attack him. One thing the Nuggets really like running are those inverted pick and rolls, and as soon as Gobert tries to go under the screen, he's leaving too much room for a long-range jumper. Then if the screener's man makes an effort to step in front of him, they'll slip the screen, once again creating good offense at the rim. It's all about opening up the paint as much as possible. When Gobert's on Joker and they get into their usual offensive sets, he can't sit back because of the shooting threat, and the rest of the defense can't make even half of a mistake without being punished. Most importantly though, is the way this matchup opens up their two-man game. When Jamal comes off a screen, Gobert has to respect Jokic as a scoring threat, so he isn't able to step in front of the ball. And when he does step in front of the ball, like on this one, well, someone better be in position to take away Joker's floater. Of course, there's always the prospect of hedging or blitzing Jamal, which is what they often did against Phoenix's guards, but the problem then becomes Jokic's ability to make plays in the short roll, and this is when they start to get into their free-flowing offense with everyone involved. handoffs to KCP or MPJ, Gobert back and drop, and shooters start to get going. For these reasons, I think the biggest X factor on that side of the ball is whether or not Cat can stay out of foul trouble. If they can keep him on Jokic for the entire game, they're so well equipped to take away from what Denver wants to do. Sure, that Nuggets team has counters, and they're such an extremely good offense that they'll produce numbers regardless, but Gobert as a roamer will undoubtedly slow them down. If Cat gets into foul trouble early and Gobert has to match up with Joker, then I'm slightly worried because you're probably relying on guys like MPJ or KCP missing shots, which isn't a gamble I'd want to take. With how the Nuggets have looked in clutch time for 2 straight years now in terms of offensive execution, if your defense is compromised in any way, it's going to be nearly impossible to get stops. With all of that said, there's also a pretty big question mark regarding whether or not Denver can slow down the Wolves. Obviously, that means slowing down Anthony Edwards, which history tells us is no easy feat. One thing I think is important to keep in mind is the difference in wing defense from what we saw in the Suns series. Instead of guys like Grayson Allen, Bradley Beal, and Royce O'Neal getting the assignment, it'll be KCP, Gordon, or the young Peyton Watson. Certainly, that'll make things at least a little bit tougher, but he's still such an incredibly explosive athlete that I don't really think anyone can stay in front of him consistently. Thankfully, the Nuggets are one of the best defenses in the NBA when it comes to preventing players from getting to the rim with the way they load up and scramble and help, so I do think the Wolves are relying on 2 key things to both go in their favor. First is Ant's pull-up shooting. We saw it last series, we saw it the year before. If he's hitting those jumpers from either the mid-range or from 3, he's a nightmare to contain. Second is the shooting of everyone else. If they're going to be aggressively sitting in Ant's driving lanes, guys like McDaniels, Alexander Walker, and Reed have to be firing on all cylinders. There's also the way Denver defends the pick and roll. Against Ant, it's very likely that Jokic will be at the level of the screen almost every single time, and I think he'll be pretty heavily tested as a decision maker. For the most part, he looked great against the Suns, making the right skip passes, using his live dribble to hunt for openings, although he does still turn the ball over quite a bit, and that's something he absolutely cannot do against the Nuggets. If his decision making is on point, they'll be able to create advantages pretty consistently, and I absolutely love how all of the supporting players attack a rotating defense, so I think they can continue scoring a lot of points. Because here's the thing, while the Nuggets are good at not letting the ball get to the paint, whenever it does get there, they're pretty helpless. Jokic obviously isn't a vertical presence at all. Gordon and MPJ are good secondary options, but can't fill the void of an elite shot blocker, and the Wolves have a lot of size and athleticism. With that said, in the past, whenever it's Conley who runs pick and roll instead of Ant, they've shown to prefer deep drop coverage, and that means it might take a big series from Mike to push them forward. Will his pull-up jumper be falling? Will he be able to get into the defense and consistently hit the floater? Because if not, they're incredibly reliant on Ant to do all of the heavy lifting, and that just puts even more of a decision-making burden on his shoulders. One way I think they can avoid running into any of these issues is by playing with pace. In semi-transition, the defense can't properly load up, which means they can't stop Ant from getting into the paint. And not only that, he's got a ton of options in the open floor, whether that's one of his streaking shooters, a rim-running Gobert, or of course the trailing Karl Anthony Towns. Speaking of Cat, it'll be interesting to see how the Nuggets defend him in the post. I'm sure they'll mix it up with some doubles, maybe a few digs, occasional single coverage, and if as a team Minnesota is struggling to create rim pressure through drives, his post-ups could end up being a really big deal. So just to quickly recap some of the more important talking points I've gone over, the biggest determining factor in this series will be who wins the battle of Nuggets offense versus Wolves defense. Will Minnesota get away with keeping Gobert as a roamer for the entire game? And if so, how can the Nuggets counter to limit his impact around the paint? If not, can Minnesota prevent guys like KCP or MPJ from heating up? Because as soon as the entire team starts to get involved, that's when it gets dangerous. On the other side, will the Nuggets be able to prevent Ant from touching the paint, whether that's in early offense, out of pick and roll, or isolation? And if so, will Ant be able to consistently make the right passing reads without turning it over? Can we expect a big series from Conley or Towns if needed? There's a lot to answer, and it sort of feels like a stalemate. I don't expect either team to have a big rebounding advantage. I don't think either one will shoot considerably better from 3. It's just that in the back of my mind, I can't shake the thought of what the non-Jokic minutes look like. That offense is already really stagnant and really reliant on Jamal to make a ton of difficult shots. If you have that limited group on the floor against a lineup that consists of Alexander Walker, Gobert, maybe Kyle Anderson, I'm really not sure you can produce enough offense to win. On the other side, they have to find a way to stop Minnesota's double bigs from just completely owning the paint, as they tend to go small ball without much rebounding or rim protection. I wouldn't be surprised if they're forced into some minutes with DeAndre Jordan, and I'm not too sure I like the sound of that. So where does that leave me overall? Well, I feel like the Jokic minutes are a stalemate, and I feel more confident in the Wolves winning the non-Jokic minutes, so naturally that would make me lean towards Minnesota, right? Before the playoffs, I'm on record saying that of any team in the league, I think the Wolves have the best chance of knocking off the Nuggets, and I still feel that way. But I do think Jokic will see over 40 minutes a game in this series, so while important, those short bench stints are a lot less meaningful in the grand scheme of things. And because I think the games will be so tight, that means we're getting lots of clutch time. Betting against the Nuggets in clutch time is like betting against LeBron to make the finals in the Eastern Conference. That's where I run into a dilemma. If the Wolves barely outplay the Nuggets for 46 minutes, I still think I give Denver a slight edge. And ultimately, my final decision comes down to this. I think we're looking at a 7-game series. I don't know if it's the result of a 3-1 comeback, a 2-0 start that gets matched, whatever the case may be. I think we see a Game 7. If the Wolves were the 2 seed, I think I would end up choosing them, but they aren't, and it's just really tough for me to see a scenario in which the Nuggets lose a Game 7 in Denver in altitude. I think it's more likely that the Wolves close the series in 6, so I think that's their best shot. If they can come out of Game 5 with a 3-2 lead, I love their chances at closing out, but if I were a betting man and forced to make a pick, Nuggets in 7 is where my chips lay. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and turn my post notifications on to be first on more content. If you're interested in my more in-depth research, make sure to check out my website and social media profiles. You can find those links in the description. Feel free to let me know down in the comments what you think of this matchup. As always, I hope you all have a great day, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.